is teaching us the importance and the beauty of how when our ancestors left Egypt, they were now trying to get closer to the Holy Land. And if we think about it, since beginning of history, you could kind of sum up the core of all Jewish arguments between the sun and the moon. Solar Jews and lunar Jews. The first group believes in consistency, and the latter group cherishes creativity. And this is where we get to this week's Parsha. You see, the conflict between the sun and the moon manifests itself in almost every area in life. Solar parents and their lunar teenagers, solar conservatives and their lunar liberals, the rock and the wave, the traditionalist and the revolutionary, the organized technocrat and the spontaneous dancer. So each of us tends to deal with conflict differently. But the common denominator for most is that we tend to overemphasize one of the two approaches so that we can form some sort of sense of identity. Sometimes as a society, we give one approach exclusive power when the other one has dominated our attention for a long time. It becomes kind of a swing from one extreme to another, embracing art and creativity until we've totally lost all sense of moral truth, and then giving total truth to discipline and dogma until there's no distinguishable personality left in us. So Judaism, in its profound understanding of human nature and the process of history, challenges us to embark on the road less traveled. And here I must invite you to become astronomers for the next 8 minutes. And it has to do with the Jewish month we presently find ourselves in. You see, there's two types of calendars used by most of civilization today: the Western calendar and the Muslim calendar. You see, the Western calendar follows the solar cycle, while the Muslim calendar follows the lunar cycle. The primary features of both calendars are the month and the year, yet their duration can be calculated through either the sun or the moon. So let's go on a little journey through these two calendars. You see, the sun completes its orbits around the Earth, or as some scientists like to put it today, the Earth completes its orbit around the sun every 365 days. That makes for a year. If you divide 365 days into 12 sections, you get approximately 30 days in each section. That makes up the months. This is how the Western calendar works. The months are not defined by the completion of any particular orbit. They're a human creation, a product of the mind dividing the sun's orbit into 12 sections. The moon, on the other hand, completes its orbit around the Earth every 29 and a half days, 12 times as fast as the sun. So that makes for a month. Now, when you multiply the lunar month, 29 or 30 days, 12 times, you have a year. So yet such a year, which is comprised of 12 lunar months, adds up to 354 days, 11 days shorter than a solar year of 365 days. So when a new lunar year begins, which is the beginning of the 13th month, the solar year has not yet finished its previous year in orbit. And that's how the Muslim calendar works. As with the months in the Western calendar, the years in the Muslim calendar are not defined by an objective astronomical reality, but as, kind of a creation of the human mind and multiplying the moon's orbit 12 times. And this is why Ramadan, which is the 9th month of the Islamic calendar, which is the Islamic month of fasting, in which practicing Muslims refrain from eating, drinking, and intimate relationships for the entire month from dawn until sunset. It could fall out either in winter or summer or any other seasons. Sometimes Ramadan is in hot August, and sometimes it's in cold February. Why? Because the Muslim calendar, unlike the Western calendar, has nothing to do with the sun and its seasons. It completely revolves around the moon. So as long as you don't mix the two calendars, you're fine. But this is where the Jews came in and generated some confusion. You see, the Jewish calendar is unique, is that it integrates these two very different cycles of time, the solar and the lunar, and it puts it into a harmonious system. So the very first mitzvah given to the Jewish people, even before the Exodus from Egypt, specified the formula which is to set the cycles of Jewish time and gave birth to the most complex calendar ever employed. So the Torah specifies that Jewish months need to be established by the lunar orbit, not by the solar orbit. We love the moon. But here's the dilemma. The Torah also instructs the Jewish people to celebrate their holidays, observed on certain days of the lunar month, during specific solar seasons. For example, we have Passover coming up just in 2 months. And it begins on the 15th day of the lunar month of Nisan, but it also must be the time of spring as defined by the solar cycle. Now, if the lunar and solar year enjoyed an identical number of days, this system would work perfectly. The lunar and solar months would travel together side by side. But since the lunar year is 354 days, and the solar year we mentioned earlier is 365 days, each passing year creates a discrepancy of 11 days between these two cycles. And in the course of 10 years, the lunar year falls behind the solar year some 110 days. So the result of this would be that Passover, which is celebrated in the lunar month of Nisan, would eventually be in the winter or in the fall. So to confront this problem, the Jewish calendar introduced something like we have this year. It's called the leap year. Every few years, the 13th month, which is consisting of 30 days, it's added to the lunar year. This way, the lunar year catches up to the solar year. And this is done approximately every 3 years. So when the discrepancy between the lunar and solar years reaches 33 days, the added month synchronizes them, kind of more or less. So let's take a journey through this 19-year cycle. During the first 2 years of the cycle, the lunar year falls behind the solar year 22 days. Therefore, by the third year of the cycle, when 36 lunar months, 3 lunar years, would have set it back almost 34 days, which is in relation to the annual seasonal solar cycle, what does the Jewish calendar do? We add a 13th month to the lunar year, and now we're just 4 days behind. 3 years later, now some 38 days behind, almost 34 from the 3 lunar years, because 4 days behind them from before. We repeat the process. Now we're just 8 days behind. Now, 2 years later, the lunar year accumulates a deficit of 29 days. So we add again a month of 30 days to the lunar year. And this actually places the lunar year ahead of the solar year. And now the solar year needs to do some catching up. And so it goes. Every 2-3 years on the Jewish calendar, an extra month is added to the Jewish lunar year. And at the conclusion of each 19-year cycle, the solar and lunar years will be perfectly aligned with each other. Which is why, once in 19 years, your English and Hebrew birthdays will finally be on the same day. Then we once again resume the cycle. Now, this year in the Jewish calendar is 5784. And it's one of those leap years. And the Hebrew month in which we presently find ourselves is Adar 1. And it's exactly such a type of month. An additional 13th month added to our lunar year. For the additional month is always added to the month of Adar. And that ensures that the following month, which is Nisan, the month of Passover, is in spring, since the lunar year has now caught up with the solar year. So, to summarize, the Jewish people calculate their time according to both the sun and the moon. Our months are the moons, our years are the suns. So, to ensure that our lunar months keep pace with the solar year, we're constantly attempting to have the moon overcome its 11-day void and catch up to the sun's year. Why the headache? Why do we need this? If the Torah wants us to synchronize our months and years with solar seasons, let it establish a solar calendar to begin with. Why the need to follow a lunar system and then try to make up for its flaws, for its shortcomings? So the answer to this is that in Judaism, we measure and calculate our days the same way in which we measure and calculate our inner lives. We define time in the same way that we define our mission in life. And our mission in life is not to become either lunar or solar, but to integrate these two forces. Sure, that we need these two celestial beings which possess differing, patterns to be kind of integrated in one. It always requires tuning, fine-tuning, checks and balances, adjustments, vigilance, humility, and the readiness to challenge ourselves. But any other way could be neglecting a vital component of our nature and our objective in life. And that is why people who run from marriage are mistaken. Yes, to synchronize these two personalities, it's not always a smooth journey, especially when one is a sun and the other a moon. Yet it's in this attempt to bring together the two orbits in which we could fully realize our inner potential. Because in the Jewish imagination, truth can never be captured via the moon or the sun on their own. Both creativity and tradition, they are critical components of our life. And it begins with the source of all. God is both never changing and yet forever creating. Stability and innovation are both expressions of God's undefined reality. Uniformity, everything having a common and unifying thread, and multiplicity, everything being distinct and unique, both come from God. And the same is true concerning tradition versus innovation. God gave man innovative ability, which we ought to utilize to its fullest. And yet, for our creativity to be productive, for our creativity to be life-affirming, God gave us a structure in which to operate. If I forfeit that structure in the name of liberty and self-expression, it would be like water escaping the boundaries of the pot in order not to come into direct contact with fire beneath the pot. What's the results? No fire left. So let's take the marital structure. Some may argue for kind of more of a complete or lunar passion, more of a kind of lunar romance without solar stable commitment to one person. Now, it may sound exciting, but the results are well known. It undermines rather than enhances the love and trust between a husband and wife. And the person often ends up with nothing. I want to end with a story. For as long as anyone could remember, there was a clock mountain high up on the tallest building in town. And as people would go about their business throughout the day, they would periodically glance upwards and then automatically check their own watches. And sometimes there'd be inconsistency, and they would reset their watches to the correct time. But times change. A murmur of discontent was heard in an element of the population. Why can't the clock be lowered down at eye level, more accessible? The clock is so high, it's a pain in the neck, quite literally, to always have to look up at it. Why can't the clock be lowered down at eye level, more accessible? And what if the clock is wrong? It's practically impossible to change it. Now, if it were to installed in a lower building, it'd be so much easier to fix it with no break. So the locals were vocal and the vocals were local. A town meeting was called, a decision was made, and the clock was lowered. Then a funny thing started happening. When people noticed a discrepancy between the town clock and their watches, more often than not, they would now adjust the time on the town clock. After all, I know that I have the right time. Then someone else would come by and readjust the clock. Within a short period of time, the clock had been fiddled with so often that when the clock said 12, you didn't know if it was 12 or 1 or maybe 4. The consensus was that it was no longer relevant, and the clock was consigned to the trash heap. Friends, we love the moon. We must be fresh, creative, passionate, and explore and actualize all of our individual resources. But the leap year teaches us that our inner moon, our inner lunacy, must once every few years be synchronized with our inner sun. We need a clock on top of the tower to tell us the right time, to define what is right and what is wrong. If not, if we take down the clock and allow every individual to adjust it according to his or her whim, we're left without a generation. We're left with no focus. The next generation does not have a direction or a vision. So by all means, be a moon, but don't be afraid to take on a commitment, to become consistently involved in a cause, to go ahead and say, you know what, I'm going to volunteer to deliver food to the needy, to visit some seniors in a golden age home or a homebound, to go ahead and try to give tzedakah, because it's only in the struggle to synthesize the sun and the moon that the full capacity and majesty of the human being can be expressed. And this is the Rebbe's message during the leap year, that yes, we have to go ahead and be a sun. We also have to be the moon. And we also have to be calculated and realize that yes, there's continuously changes, but to remember that the sun, the Torah was here, and the Torah will be here, and the Torah will continue to be here. And we must cherish our gift, the merit of us taking our precious time to study Torah. Let's hope God will do his mitzvah and very soon send true peace all over the world with the coming of Mashiach now. Any questions? I want to wish everyone a very good Shabbos and only good news by everyone, and sei gesund. Stay well.